Welcome to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. Our guest today took the path less traveled as an author, and that has made all the difference. James Gilbert was an historian before he became a novelist, but as a youth, he showed signs. He wrote plays for puppet and marionette shows, and he was also editor of his high school student newspaper. The two interests entwined when he was professor at the University of Maryland, and during that time, he published 11 books on American culture, one of which was selected as a New York Times notable book. He has lived and taught abroad in Paris and with year-long Fulbright fellowships in Australia, Germany, and the University of Uppsala, Sweden, where he received an honorary doctorate degree. His fiction titles include The Key Party, Tales of Little Egypt, and Zona Romantica, which introduced his character Amanda Pennyworth, the American consul to Puerto Vallarta, and an amateur but very effective sleuth. Murder at the Olympiad is his second book in the Amanda Pennyworth mystery series, and we're here to talk about it today. Very pleased to welcome author James Gilbert.
Thank you very much.
What an absolute delight to do this. The book is fantastic. I really enjoyed it. But also, I want to get background on you before we talk into the book. Academia has treated you very well, and you published, as we noted, a number of books on American culture before switching to fiction. Was there an event or a series of events that triggered that shift?
Yes, well, something that's been nagging me all during my career, but the last history book I wrote was a history of the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. It was a wonderful, grand event, and one of the great World's Fairs in American history, in world history. Mm-hmm. And I came across a really interesting document from the State Historical Society. A number of people who had been to the fair were still living at this point, and the people from the Historical Society went out to interview them, and they asked, well, what did you see? What was it like? Did you have a good time? What struck you about the fair? And all the people said, well, what we really liked was the ice cream, and we liked a couple of things in the midway and so on, and the people from the Missouri Historical Society were really angry because in the write-up they said they didn't tell us what they were supposed to tell us. They didn't tell us what they saw. And I looked at this document and I thought, well, no, actually they did tell you what they saw. And what the historians have said was important about the fair was probably not very important. And what the people actually did was important. And it struck me that historians just couldn't get inside people. They could look at documents, they could look at newspapers, they could look at photographs, they could do all the research in the world, and they could never get at the actual intimate thoughts of people. And so I thought, well, maybe the way to do that is to write fiction, where I can actually get inside people. And that's really why I changed.
Oh, okay. Well, then there's a second shift from the first two novels into more a detective fiction here with an amateur sleuth, which is a very popular category. Was there again something that caused that switch?
I'm not sure where that came from. I actually spent a number of vacations in Puerto Vallarta. And well, I will tell you where it came from. Now that it occurs to me, I did a stint one summer working for the State Department in a very curious capacity. I was on a promotion panel, and so I read about 5,000 CVs and vitas and autobiographies of various people in the State Department. And I learned a lot about what State Department people do, especially people who are consulates. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, maybe I should, if I'm going to write a detective story, wouldn't it be interesting to have the detective be an American consul in a foreign place? And that's where the idea of Amanda Pennyworth came from.
Why pick a woman lead character? How did that come about?
Well, you know, I'm not sure, except that I thought that it would be more trouble for her, and I wanted to make it problematic because she has to confront the very macho Mexican police, and she has to confront the American ambassador frequently, and so she works in a male world dominated by men, and it just makes it harder for her. And I think the struggle of a detective is really the story in any detective novel.
Well, and it's very interesting how this one came together too. I understand also that the decision to a key plot point for this particular book came from your glancing up a stairway at one point.
Yes, indeed. I I was walking in this kind of seedy place in Puerto Vallarta. It's called the Zona Romantica. It means it means a romantic zone, but in fact, it's full of nightclubs and massage parlors and bars, and it's got some gay life and expat life.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked by this open door. It looked kind of mysterious. You know, people don't leave their doors open in anywhere in the city. Mm-hmm. And I looked up and there was this kind of gloomy staircase. And then I walked back and I could see from the looking at the building that there was a gay flag on top. And I thought, oh, this must be a gay establishment. Either it's a bar or a sauna or something like that. And so I thought, wow, wouldn't it be fun to write a mystery where the murder takes place in such a place?
Right. And we should explain at the start, if people are just checking the title out, Murder at the Olympiad has nothing to do with the Olympics. That's the name of the establishment. I just wanted to make that clear, because for a half second when I first got this assignment, I thought, oh, that would be different. But
well,
this is...
actually, I found out later that the name of this place was the Spartacus.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, well, it's got something to do with the Romans and the Greeks, and so maybe I'll use that title.
You know, one of the things that intrigued me by reading the book was not just the murder mystery, but the milieu itself, which portrayed all of this kind of the social, political, psychological tensions between the U.S. and Mexico, which are enacted person to person in this, which gives it a real intimacy. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, I really thought, you know, from my experience in reading all these CVs of diplomats that one summer, I thought, you know, there's got to be a really interesting relationship between Americans who are in a foreign country dealing with Americans, trying to deal with several bureaucracies, the Mexican bureaucracy, the American bureaucracy. Everybody has their own values and their own motives. And I thought putting a detective right in the middle of that would really be interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it worked out very well, I will say, as a very satisfied reader. Aside from the occasional Miss Marple or like Tess Gerritsen's Rizzoli and Isles tag team, there are far fewer female sleuths in fiction. Do you have a theory on that? Why do you? We already knew why you chose to go that way, but why do so few other authors do that?
Well, I look, there are lots of different kinds of mysteries. There's the hard-boiled mystery, the Elmore Leonard type, where the detective is runs up against gangsters, and there's a lot of violence in it. I think I didn't want to write something like that. I don't think I'm very good at writing about violence, or you know, alcoholic, down in the dumps detectives, which is kind of a very popular trope. So yeah. I decided to write about a woman detective. I think there are a number of detectives like that, but I will say the problem with the Miss Marple type is that you never you never understand how she's working. You know, she at the end very sits all the suspects down and she says, "Oh, you did it," and then she relates this this crazy story about all the people who are related you didn't know about, and this bastard son, and this adopted daughter, and this cousin, and money that was in a will. It's very complex, and I wanted to write about a character who's just an ordinary woman
Hmm.
who falls into having to solve a murder mystery just because she doesn't trust the Mexican police, and she thinks there's something wrong,
Hmm.
and she wants to correct it. That's her job, and
Yeah.
so she's really just doing her job.
Yeah. And it's always dangerous to assume that the things the character says reflect an author's viewpoint. But at one point, you do have Amanda saying she was only ever bested by Miss Marple, but then Agatha Christie didn't play fair. So I'm just
That
thinking
is
that
my opinion.
I thought that might be sneaking in there as well. Oh, what was the most difficult part about writing this book? Obviously, you've got good background from your exposure to all of the people in the diplomatic service and your own being in Puerto Vallarta. But were there any problems with it? It seems like it flows very nicely at this point.
Uh, I um, I'm trying to think if I had problems. I I did when I first plotted this out. I wasn't sure who the killer was going to be,
Hmm.
and 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 I wanted it to be kind of a surprise, but I did leave some clues in the beginning.
Hmm.
Uh, and uh, and I think what was most problematic was how much I should reveal
Uh,
about who the killer was. And I think I kept that pretty much a secret until the very end. Although when you find out the reason, you understand. Oh yeah, I understand. It
yeah.
makes the whole novel understandable.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the twist that makes you rethink everything you saw before with this new information through maybe a different lens and go, oh, that's a lot clearer now. So,
Right.
I'm also a big fan of authors who have what I call the telling detail. And one of the things I really enjoyed was in chapter 2, Amanda's description of Nando. I want to just quote a couple of sentences because I think you do a really deft job here. She looked intently at Nando, thinking that this very ordinary looking middle aged man with stark black hair and a bronze complexion, someone who would never be singled out in a crowd, was the perfect employee, tactful, smart, and always willing to take up the slack in the duties of the consulate. And then this last sentence really gets me, and someone who pretty much anticipated her thoughts. Can you get me a couple of assistants like that? I could use a few of them.
I don't know anybody like that.
Uh,
I was thinking who would be the ideal employee, uh, because she had to have somebody who could pick up the loose ends of her life. After all, here she was running out, uh, trying to solve a murder mystery, and the office was full of people who had problems that needed to be solved.
mhm.
And so I had to create a character who was who could do most of the things that had to be done, but was also uh, kind of a friend, uh, in the way that a good employee is really a friend of yours.
Yeah, understand. I like the anticipation and being willingness to help on that. Um, Also, she is a little bit examining her own self. And there's one passage that leaped out at me. She says, why did she always hide behind words when she confronted something she didn't understand? Maybe words were her closet. Well, that was a pretty interesting insight for a person to have.
Well, I thought I wanted to make her a person who really was puzzled about herself. Uh, I I I thought that she ought to question why she was uh, uh, so involved in this mystery. Why did she do this? And and I think she also is she's also questioning in this novel. And I will say there's a third novel that I've written
Ah,
about her, where it becomes even more explicit. She wonders why in the world she's doing this with her life. This is being a diplomat is a very lonely and difficult sort of job. After all, every 3 years, the State Department says, "Okay, you got to move."
mm,
And how do you create a relationship that way? How do
yeah,
you really get immersed in a life? What kind of a life is this? And in a way, you discover that you've married in the way that a priest or a nun marries the Catholic Church.
mm,
You've married the State Department,
mhm.
and that's not a very nice partner.
Yeah, it's very demanding indeed. You do give her a little bit of a backstory. You mentioned a relationship she had at a previous posting, which I thought was a nice touch. Just gives a little bit more fleshed out the character a bit. But I have to compliment one of the best things in the whole book is the list of reasons to commit murder that she writes out to her. So, and I'm just going to quickly read them because they're fascinating. Under the motives, she shows jealousy, not envy, some obstacle to happiness, an obstacle to wealth, an obstacle to position, hatred, revenge, a vendetta, momentary uncontrolled rage, irrational, anger, rational, desperation, safety for oneself, security for others, self-defense, to cover up another crime, and my favorite, something else? Question mark. You must have had so much fun writing that.
I did. I did. I sat down and I said, "Why the hell would you create? Why would you murder somebody?"
Mm-hmm.
And and I and I and so I just wrote a list, and then I thought, well, I'll put that in the book.
and it really is an absolute delight as well. Um, yeah, part of it also because your description of the town and the surroundings, I get a real feel for the place, and that's not always something you get. The place almost becomes a character in itself.
I thought so. I thought so indeed when I was writing about it. It's a very interesting and strange place. It's got three parts.
Mhm.
There's an American, actually a tourist place with high rises and very fancy gated communities, and everybody timeshares, and that's where the kind of wealthy Americans go for a vacation. You get a nice beach and food that's not too hot, and people come by with handicraft fairs and things of that sort. All right, that's one part of the town. I wouldn't be caught dead there.
Mm.
Uh, the second part of the town is the old town. It's where the Mexicans themselves live, and it's cobblestone streets and lovely small houses and churches and things of that sort. And then there's the zona romantica, which is anything goes.
Mm.
And I thought, what a wonderful geography of possibilities. And what I try to do in the novel is move people through those various environments, and that reveals the nature of the city.
It didn't do a fabulous job of it. Absolutely. And one of the things that I really enjoy about that is the way that the characters react to each other and also react to their surroundings. And like fish, they don't notice it, but it affects them in every way.
Yeah, absolutely, that's true. I think in some ways my favorite characters are the mother and father of the murdered boy,
Oh yeah.
uh, who who are who are divorced, and it's been an angry, nasty divorce. They don't talk to each other, and they're brought together in Puerto Vallarta because they come to get the remains of their son. And I thought their interaction was uh, was really fun to write about. I thought, what if you really hated somebody, if you really couldn't stand somebody, but if you were also sharing grief,
Yeah. It's
how
very
would you react?
complex.
How
Yeah.
would you react? And that was so much fun to write.
Yeah. Obviously, you're getting a kick out of this, and you've gotten really some good reviews from Kirkus and other places. And do you have You say you've written the third book, which will be coming out at some point, maybe later this year. Can you give us a little hint of the title on that one? And
I wish I knew the title. I
oh,
haven't thought of it yet.
all right.
I think
Well,
I might call it Danielle,
uh,
because it's the murder of a very glamorous woman from a suburb of Chicago, um, and she's with a group of people who've come down in a group trip, and they go on a boat trip to a beach, and she gets murdered at the beach, and the story really is about Amanda happens to be on that same that same boat trip, and so she's drawn into the solving the murder of this woman.
right.
It's a very different book because it takes place both in Puerto Vallarta and then back in the United States. About half of it is back in the United
Oh,
States.
okay. Interesting as well on that. Do you foresee this being a series character, or do you have like a set number as the trilogy going to wrap it all up? Where are we going with that?
I I'm thinking right now. I haven't even begun to do this, but I'm thinking Amanda has a kind of a sometimes boyfriend in Puerto Vallarta. He's actually a Mexican policeman who, in the first novel, she gets together with him in the first novel, and the police chief doesn't like Amanda, so he sends this guy to Oaxaca, get rid of him. Anyway, he comes back to be on this boat trip with her. In the third novel. I'm thinking in the fourth novel, I may kill him off.
You say that so blithely.
She may have to solve his murder.
Wow.
but I don't know.
All right. I mean, something I like to ask people that are writing serials if they have an end point in mind, a final scene for their character.
Well, I really don't.
Okay.
Except that if I do kill him off, the final scene would be, beyond finding the killer, would be her. I think she would probably leave the Foreign Service.
Okay.
And I think it would just have been too much for her.
Yeah. Well, I can see an emotional arc building through the books for something like that. Very, very interesting. You have been generous with your time, and I don't want to take too much more of it, but I just want to make sure that we had covered everything about the book. The website you have, where would they find it?
I do. It's called James Gilbert Author, all one word, .com.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is available at Amazon or Barnes and Noble or through a bookstore. Anywhere that you order books, it's available.
All right. I thank you so much for your time. Our guest today has been James Gilbert. The book is called Murder at the Olympiad. Highly recommended. Thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.